Well, hey everybody, this is Chris DeFurio with Keys to the Shop. Welcome to another edition of Shift Break. Today's episode is brought to you by La Marzocco. They've been making espresso machines by hand in Florence, Italy since 1927. La Marzocco is an icon in specialty coffee, specifically because they are dependable, beautiful, high-functioning, high-capacity, and innovative espresso machines. They've been serving the needs of coffee shops globally for so long, and they've earned that icon status, I'll tell you. And I'm frequently recommending my clients use La Marzocco espresso machines. They have a lot to choose from. Machines like the KB90 with the straight and locking portafilters, scales in the drip tray, auto flush feature. You've got the Leva espresso machine with the levers, which is essentially a modernized throwback to the pulling of espresso. It's a very tactile machine. Of course, the Linea PB, one of my personal favorites, so many. And so go to lamarzocco.usa.com, check it out and reach out to them actually, have a conversation and see what the right machine is for your cafe or cafes by emailing info@lamarzocco.usa.com. Now, today's episode of Shift Break is also brought to you by Rattleware, rattleware.com. Now, Rattleware is the thing that you count on in order for everything to work. It's kind of behind the scenes. It's kind of like the foundation of your building. This is the function smallwares provide in your cafe. Rattleware recognizes this and wants to be that kind of a support network through smallwares for your coffee shop. Things like pitchers and shot glasses and whisks and knock boxes and everything in between that comes together, and you just need it to work. And they want you to have smallwares that just work. So if you're looking for smallwares for your cafe, if you're tired of these little things making big issues in the coffee shop, go and check out Rattleware at rattleware.com. All right, everybody. Well, today we have kind of a continuation of an episode, a Shift Break episode that we did a long time ago. And that episode you'll find as the first option in the recommended episodes of the show notes. I know that you listen to podcasts like I listen to podcasts. And how many times do you actually check the show notes? The word show notes is probably, is there a podcast called Show Notes? Check the show notes. There should be, but too meta. But the point is that actually there's some really good information in the show notes. All that to say, make sure you check out the links to related episodes. But the one that is kind of the catalyst for today's episode is the Shift Break episode called Hard Work is Hard. And in that Shift Break episode, I made the case for what I think is very common knowledge and maybe a less common thing today, I don't know, where we have to admit that in order to work well, we trade our energy for a lack of energy at the end of work. Work takes it out of us, it being energy. And there is a difference between despondence and dysfunction and everything else that sometimes is conflated with a feeling of being tired and a feeling of having no energy. I'm just so, even being burned out sometimes is a word that's misappropriated and used as a kind of coverall for I'm tired. Now, we all work, like I just got done doing 24 hours of camping in the backyard with my son, and most of the day it was 95 degrees. Don't ask me why we did this in the summer. It was a decision that has been coming for a long time, and we want to camp a lot more, and it was really fun, actually. Once you got that layer of grime on you and it just protects you from the elements, it's great. It's great. But it did remind me, at the end of it, I feel today after we've eaten a civilized meal and showered and in an air-conditioned building, kind of feel exhausted. But it was all in a worthy cause. It was all because we worked hard to set up camp, to make fires, to do all of that stuff. And that's the point of that one episode is, look, when you come to work, don't call it dysfunctional. Don't call it toxic. Don't call it burnout or anything else if it's just hard. And sometimes there's unnecessary hard and there is hard, right? Sometimes hard is just hard, right? Sometimes work is just a lot of effort, and it always will be. Our pursuit in work is not to eliminate effort, but to eliminate needless effort, you see. So there's that episode. But what I really wanted to also tack on to this was the idea, and of course, this episode, I think, of Hard Work is Hard was directed at people who are coming up in the coffee industry and owners and leaders alike in the business of coffee. We like to think that it's only the baristas who have a tough time doing tough work, but there's a different kind of work that needs to be taken on in the world of coffee when you're an owner. That's not just the shift work, but it's also the labor of leadership, the labor of crafting the operations, the labor of being patient with people as they develop into the professionals that may, in fact, be longtime baristas for you. But that we feel the effort is a sign of dysfunction causes us to blame other people. For baristas, it's, I feel so tired all the time, and man, screw this job. My boss is toxic. And, they just all sorts of misappropriation of these words when really it's just you're not used to hard work, frankly. And that's the same thing for owners and operators, managers who get into the job. And because of the inertia, because of the effort, they feel like, well, my job wouldn't be so hard if it wasn't for these gosh darn baristas and blah, blah, blah. We just go on and on. Everyone's sort of pointing the finger. Sometimes hard things are just that way. And that's okay, because when something is really hard to get going and build momentum in, once it does build momentum, it has a lot of it and you get more reward as a result. So I wanted to tack on to the end of this episode the idea of time investment and taking that investment seriously, seriously enough to do it with forethought and planning. So, as usual, we're not going to focus in specifically and say, hey, you baristas, or hey, you owners. I think both groups of people have roles to play in the business, of course. On the ownership side of things, there's a need to accept and count the cost of the time investment needed into relationships before it happens so that you can predictably show up the way you want baristas to show up to their shift. You want them to do very well the things that are in their job description. And the unfortunate reality is no one's really holding you accountable for your role except you. And so you've got to do a lot more due diligence and soul searching before you launch into saying, well, here's what I do in the business, because they know they're being watched. You're being watched by them, but you've got this get out of jail free card, which is, well, they don't understand what it's like to be an owner. That's kind of bunk, and I know they don't understand, and that's fine. And they can't understand. So as a result of this, revelation that they can't understand because they aren't the owner, where do you go from there? Do you just keep commiserating? Do you keep ruminating while staring at your ceiling? You just move on and say, I have a unique role to play. And that is what I have to do. I have to show up, and I have to show up in an intentional way in this role, the same way that I want my baristas to show up for their shifts. And so then we shift over to baristas and say, that's the same for you. You are dedicating an incredible amount of time from your life to this business in exchange for pay and tips and all this other stuff. Now you can get into and dice up all of the is it worth it and make it very sanctimonious about the belonging and make it super weird and familial the way that you don't want owners to do with you, but you do to owners sometimes. Baristas often cross the line between professional and personal when it suits them, but really give no slack to owners who do the same. I don't recommend either group do that. You don't treat the business like this place where you find ultimate meaning and fulfillment and belonging in your life. I know that it feels like, the pastries and the coffee and the camaraderie and all this other stuff that happens, it all is a kind of a byproduct. There is that feeling there, right? But that it doesn't rev your engine every single day is not a fault of the business. Oftentimes, these are things that we bring to our work. And we then use the dedication we have to the business as an excuse for poor behavior because we feel as though we are losing out on a lot of our life because we are in a job, right? But that's what a job is. It is an acknowledgement that I am exchanging my time for something that I think is worth my time on a voluntary basis. I saw an ad for a job for this coffee shop. I said, you know what I could do? I could dedicate a certain number of hours per week to do this job at this place. I will pursue this. And if they give it to me, The agreement is that I will show up for the shifts that I said I'd show up for the amount I said I would show up for. And that is the agreement. And the same, I think, is reasonable to expect from owners and operators. You say you're going to do something, do it. You say, hey, every 6 months to a year, we're going to give a raise, and you forget about it. That's like a barista showing up late for an opening shift and having customers turned away at the door. You have to look at it from the perspective of both groups and say there has to be an acknowledgement up front. We are exchanging our time for this operation in exchange for whatever comes our way. Maybe it's a paycheck, it's the profit of the business, it's the mission that you have as a business. Maybe as a barista, it's also the experience that you get in learning how to do this work so one day you can open your own business. But the main message here is you have to show up, and you agreed ahead of time that you would show up. Even if it's sacrificial, you are actually limiting your life. Everyone has this kind of walk back that happens when they get into the business because it turns hard. They say, well, actually, I'm changing my availability, or actually, there's a concert, or actually, I want to take 3 weeks off multiple times per year. And then I'm going to leave the owners holding the bag and saying, we had an agreement that you would be available for this amount of time. Oh, too bad. Whatever. I have to live my life. You, as a barista, you as a trainer, you as an owner, you made an agreement. I am going to limit my own freedom to do what I want whenever I want in exchange for this work that will give me other freedoms to do other things that I want to do. So if we have mutual respect for one another and we actually respect our own word, we wouldn't have half of the issues that we have today in the coffee shop, because we would take ourselves seriously, we would take our commitments seriously, and we wouldn't start walking back our commitments when it became inconvenient. So I want to entreat you here, whoever you are listening to this, it's the kind of let your yes be yes, let your no be no, and try as hard as you possibly can to honor that commitment that you have made out of respect for yourself and the respect you want other people to have for you as well. And then what ends up happening is we gain that momentum that we're missing. Why do we have so many people just falling off in the business of coffee, in the work of coffee? I think a lot of it has to do with what we're discussing today. And if we just had a little bit more grit, self-respect, and mutual respect in the work that is hard, we would start to see that hard work start to be more rewarding, rather than just assuming when we meet resistance that it's a sign that we need to immediately tap out, walk it back, and so forth. And so if we can just get to, like we say, higher degrees of imperfection in doing this thing, of course, it's better to have imperfect action than perfect theory, then you'll start to see your business improve and you'll enjoy it a lot more. So a little bit of a longer one today with Shift Break, but I hope that it helps. And be sure to listen to the Shift Break episodes in the show notes as well, linked for your listening pleasure. As always, I am grateful for you listening to the podcast, and thank you for supporting us all of these years, almost 8 years now. If you have any need for coaching one-on-one with yourself or your leadership team, then reach out. Keys to the Shop Consulting works with a lot of different people around the world, in fact, and it would be great to have a conversation and see how I might be able to help you with what you are working on right now to get your business to that next right level. All right. So with that, I say goodbye, and we'll see you here next week on another edition of Shift Break, from Keys to the Shop.